So I never thought I'd find myself standing on a rooftop in the middle of a busy city, surrounded by buzzing bees, feeling completely out of place, and yet totally captivated. Let me back up a bit. A couple months ago, I was your typical office drone, slogging through spreadsheets and endless Zoom calls in a cubicle that smelled like stale coffee and desperation. My city apartment was small, cluttered, and honestly kind of depressing. I was itching for something different, something that didn't involve fluorescent lights or corporate jargon. That's when I noticed the community garden project on the roof of my building was looking for volunteers. I figured, why not? Worst case, I'd get some fresh air and a break from my usual routine. When I first climbed those stairs to the roof, I wasn't prepared for what I saw. Instead of just a patch of dirt and a few wilting plants, there was this incredible rooftop apiary, dozens of hives buzzing with activity. And right there in the middle of it all was him, a guy with sun-kissed skin, messy curls, and this easy smile that somehow made the bees look less intimidating. He was wearing these chunky gloves and a wide-brimmed hat, skillfully inspecting a hive frame as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He caught me staring and winked. "You've got a buzz about you," he said, and I swear it wasn't just the bees he was talking about. I chuckled nervously, trying to play it cool, but inside I was thinking, who is this guy? And how is he so effortlessly charming while covered in bee stings waiting to happen? His name's Jamie, and he's the rooftop's beekeeper, part scientist, part artist, and apparently part flirt. He manages the hives like a conductor leading an orchestra, and every day he's up there tending to the bees, harvesting honey, and chatting with anyone curious enough to wander up. I started volunteering just to be near him, even though I knew next to nothing about bees. The weirdest part? Jamie talks about the bees like they're old friends, sharing their moods and quirks, and somehow it rubbed off on me. I started noticing little things, the sound of the hive's hum, the way the bees dance to communicate, the golden honey dripping from the frames. It was mesmerizing. Now here I am, sitting on that same rooftop, gloves on, heart racing, trying not to botch my first hive inspection, while Jamie watches with that patient smile. I'm pretty sure at this point the bees aren't the only ones making me nervous. And honestly, I'm kind of hoping for a sting. Jamie chuckled softly as he noticed the way my hands trembled just a bit while I held the hive frame. "Relax," he said, voice calm but teasing. "Bees can smell fear, but they mostly just want to do their thing. Yeah, easier said than done when you're standing on a rooftop with a dozen thousand tiny flying stingers just centimeters away from your face." I adjusted my gloves awkwardly, trying not to drop the frame, and forced a smile. "Right, just casual rooftop bee whisperer over here." Jamie's grin widened, and for a moment the city noise, the honking cars, the distant sirens, the endless drone of urban life faded out. It was just the two of us up there, surrounded by this strangely peaceful chaos of bees buzzing and wings fluttering, sunlight catching on golden honeycomb. "So what made you volunteer here anyway?" Jamie asked, leaning slightly closer so the conversation didn't have to compete with the buzzing. His eyes were bright, curious, like he genuinely wanted to know. I shrugged, feeling a little sheepish. Honestly, I was tired of being stuck inside staring at a screen. Thought maybe if I got some fresh air and did something hands-on, I'd stop feeling like I was wasting my life. Jamie nodded thoughtfully, then tapped the hive frame gently. "Beekeeping has a way of pulling you into something bigger than yourself. You don't just keep bees, you become part of their world. It's messy and complicated, but kind of magical." Magic wasn't a word I'd ever used before to describe anything in my life, but right then it felt pretty accurate. Watching Jamie move effortlessly, like he belonged there, made me realize how much I admired that kind of passion, something I'd been missing. "Here," he said, holding out a small brush. "Try brushing away the bees gently. They're more curious than aggressive, but they don't like being poked or provoked." I took the brush, feeling completely ridiculous, and tried to mimic the smooth motion Jamie used. My first attempt was shaky, and a few of the bees wobbled uncertainly before settling back down. Jamie just laughed, a warm sound that made my nerves ease up a little. "You're a natural," he teased, eyes twinkling. "Or at least, less of a disaster than most rookies." I smiled, and maybe I wanted to believe him. The truth was, being up here, away from everything that usually stressed me out, felt like a breath of fresh air. And being near Jamie was a bonus I definitely didn't expect. Over the next few weeks, I found myself looking forward to our rooftop sessions more than anything else. Jamie taught me how to read the bees, behavior, the way they fanned their wings when it was too hot, the subtle dances that meant follow me or danger. Sometimes we'd sit on the edge of the roof, sharing a jar of fresh honey Jamie had just harvested, and talk about everything, from his childhood growing up near wildflower fields to my own city struggles. One afternoon, the sky was a perfect shade of blue, and the city seemed quieter than usual. Jamie and I were inspecting a particularly healthy hive when he suddenly paused and looked at me with this honest expression I hadn't seen before. "You know," he said softly, "most people don't stick around after the first couple of sessions. Bees aren't for everyone. But you've got something that makes this all feel right. I'm glad you're here." My heart did this stupid little flip, and I had to remind myself to breathe. "I'm glad too," I said, not thinking twice about how much that simple truth meant. We worked side by side in companionable silence for a while, the bees humming their steady song. Then Jamie reached out, brushing a stray curl back from my forehead. It was such a small gesture, but it felt electric, like the kind of moment you remember years later and smile about. "I guess that's the buzz you were talking about," I joked, though my voice was a little softer than usual. Jamie smiled, eyes warm and steady. "Yeah, that's exactly it." Later, when the sun started dipping behind the skyscrapers and casting long shadows across the city, we packed up the gear. As we descended the stairwell together, the rooftop fading behind us, I realized something was shifting. The buzzing in my chest wasn't just from the bees anymore. Back in my apartment that night, with the city lights twinkling outside the window, I found myself scrolling through my phone, rereading the few texts Jamie had sent. Casual check-ins about the hives, little jokes about my bee rookie status, and once, a photo of a jar of honey with a note. "For you, the best buzz I know." I smiled, a genuine one that reached my eyes, the kind I hadn't had in a long time. For the first time in a while, I felt like I was part of something real, something alive, and I couldn't wait to get back up there. A few days later, Jamie surprised me by inviting me to a weekend workshop he was leading for some local urban gardeners. I was nervous at first, me standing in front of a small group of people talking about bees, but when I saw Jamie in his element, explaining hive care with that same easy confidence he had on our rooftop, I felt this strange surge of pride, like I was part of something bigger than just my own little corner of the city. After the workshop, while everyone was packing up, Jamie pulled me aside. "You did great today," he said, voice low enough that only I could hear. "You're getting better at this every time." I shrugged, trying not to let the blush creep up my neck. "Thanks. I think I'm starting to understand what you mean about bees being part of something bigger. It's kind of addictive." Jamie grinned, that lopsided smile that made me forget how awkward I was feeling. "Yeah, it's a good kind of addiction." We ended up walking through a nearby park, the city's noise mellowing into a comfortable background hum. We talked about everything. His childhood in a small town where beekeeping was a family tradition, my struggles to find purpose in the city, the little moments that made life feel worth it. The conversation was easy, like we'd known each other for years instead of a few weeks. At one point, Jamie stopped and looked at me with that serious but gentle look he had. "I don't say this often, but I'm really glad you showed up on that rooftop. You bring something unexpected." The way he said it, like I was some kind of surprise even to myself, made my heart skip. "I'm glad too," I admitted, feeling a little braver than usual. Then, out of nowhere, Jamie reached out and took my hand. It was warm and steady, and the simple contact sent a rush through me that I wasn't ready to analyze just yet. We kept walking, fingers intertwined, the city around us fading into the background. That night, back in my apartment, I couldn't stop thinking about how natural it felt to be with Jamie. How the easy laughter, the shared silences, and even the nervousness around these bees had opened something in me I hadn't expected. Over the next few weeks, our rooftop sessions became the highlight of my days. Jamie taught me how to check for queen cells, how to tell if the hive was healthy or stressed, and even how to harvest honey without upsetting the bees. Each lesson was a little victory for me, but more than that, it was time spent with him, time that felt meaningful in a way I hadn't known I was missing. One afternoon, as we were carefully lifting a heavy frame dripping with fresh honey, Jamie stopped and looked at me with that familiar sparkle. You know, people say beekeeping requires patience and respect. I think it also requires trust. I paused, wiping sweat from my forehead, and met his gaze. Trust? He nodded slowly. Trust that the bees won't sting you if you don't scare them. Trust that the hive will thrive if you care for it. And sometimes, trust that the people you let in aren't going to hurt you. His words hit me harder than I expected. I realized then that he wasn't just talking about bees. I smiled, a little shy but genuine. I think I'm learning to trust. Jamie's smile softened, and before I knew it, he was leaning in, his hand brushing the back of my neck. The bees buzzed softly around us, but all I could hear was the quickening of my own heartbeat. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, but full of everything we hadn't said in words. It was a promise, a beginning, and somehow it felt as natural as the hum of the hive. When we finally pulled apart, Jamie rested his forehead against mine and whispered, "You've got a buzz about you, all right." I laughed breathlessly, the city skyline stretching behind us like a witness to something new and fragile and incredible. From that moment on, the rooftop wasn't just a place to tend bees. It was where we built something real, one careful step at a time. And honestly, I never wanted to leave. After that first kiss on the rooftop, things between Jamie and me started to shift in ways I hadn't really expected. It wasn't like suddenly we were declaring love or making grand gestures, at least not yet. It was more subtle, like the way a new flower pushes its way through the soil, slow and steady, but impossible to ignore once it blooms. The next few days, I caught myself looking forward to those stolen moments, just the two of us up on the roof, brushing honey off our hands and swapping stories while the bees hummed the steady soundtrack around us. Jamie was patient with me, always teaching, always joking, but there was an unspoken something in the air now, a quiet intimacy that made my chest tighten in the best possible way. One evening, after a long day of work and rooftop maintenance, Jamie suggested we grab dinner at this little hole-in-the-wall place he loved a few blocks from the building. I agreed, mostly because the idea of spending more time with him felt like a lifeline. We sat across from each other in a cozy booth, the kind of place where the waiters pretend not to notice when you're laughing too loudly or getting a little awkward. Jamie picked at his food, eyes flickering up to mine with that goofy smile I was starting to know so well. So, he said, "Have you thought about what you want to do after the bees? Do you want to keep at it? Maybe even beekeep yourself someday?" I shrugged, feeling a little unsure. The truth was, before Jamie, I hadn't given much thought to anything beyond surviving the daily grind. But now I was starting to imagine something different. A life more connected, more alive. I don't know, I admitted. But I do know I want to keep learning. It feels right, you know? Like I finally found a place where I fit. Jamie nodded, his expression thoughtful. That's how it started for me. Took me a while to realize it wasn't just about the bees, but about finding something that mattered. There was a beat of silence between us, comfortable and charged all at once. Then, Jamie reached across the table, his fingers brushing against mine. It wasn't a grand gesture, just a simple touch, but it said everything words couldn't. On the walk back to the building, the city lights shimmered off the wet pavement from a recent rain, and the cool night air wrapped around us like a blanket. Jamie's hand found mine again, and this time, I didn't hesitate to squeeze back. Up on the roof, the hives were quiet in the evening glow. We sat side by side on a bench, not saying much, just listening to the distant sounds of the city and the soft rustle of the rooftop garden. "I'm glad you're here," Jamie said softly, breaking the silence. "Me too," I whispered, leaning my head on his shoulder. Those simple words felt like a promise. Like we were starting something real, something neither of us had planned but both desperately needed. But life, as it tends to do, wasn't done throwing curveballs. A couple of weeks later, Jamie got a call that his family needed him back home for a while, a health scare with his dad that couldn't wait. I saw the worry in his eyes when he told me, the way his confident, easygoing mask slipped just a little. "I'm going to have to leave the hives in someone else's hands for a bit," he said one morning, voice low. "I don't know how long I'll be gone." I nodded, trying to keep my own panic at bay. "I can help. I've been learning, right? I can watch over them while you're away." Jamie looked at me like I'd just offered him the moon. "You? Really? You'd do that?" "Yeah," I said, surprising even myself with how sure I sounded. "It's not just about the bees anymore. I want to do this. For you. For us." His smile was slow and real, the kind that reaches the eyes. "You're stronger than you think." The day he left, I stood on the rooftop alone, the weight of responsibility settling in like a heavy fog. The bees were restless without Jamie's steady presence, and I could feel their unease like a ripple through the hive. I fumbled through the routine, checking each frame, brushing away bees, trying to keep everything calm. It was harder than I expected, like I was trying to pilot a plane without a co-pilot. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I remembered Jamie's words and the way he had trusted me. Sleep was a rare luxury those first few nights. I'd lie awake, wondering how he was doing, whether he missed me as much as I missed him, but I also realized something important. I was capable. I was growing. One evening, as I was closing up the rooftop for the night, my phone buzzed with a text from Jamie. "How's my rookie beekeeper?" I smiled so hard I thought my face might hurt. I typed back, "Still alive. Bees haven't run me off yet," he replied almost instantly. That's progress. We started texting more, sharing updates, silly jokes, even late-night conversations about everything and nothing. It kept us connected, made the distance bearable, and reminded me that what we were building wasn't fragile. It was real. Weeks passed, and with each day, I grew more confident in the hive and in myself. Jamie had that thoughtful look again, the one that made me want to lean in and catch whatever he was thinking. So he began, breaking the comfortable silence. "Have you thought about what comes next? Like, beyond the honey and hives?" I shrugged, feeling suddenly a little exposed. "Honestly, I'm not sure. I like this. Us, the bees, the rooftop. It feels like I've finally found something that makes sense. But beyond that, I don't know." Jamie smiled, but it was tinged with something I couldn't quite read. "I get that. Sometimes it's hard to think about the future when you're still figuring out the now." I nodded, glad he understood. "What about you? What do you want?" He looked out over the city skyline, the light catching in his eyes. "I want to build something real. Something that lasts. But it's scary, you know? Putting yourself out there, trusting someone." I reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth, the steady pulse. "We don't have to have it all figured out right now." He squeezed my hand gently. "Yeah, one day at a time." That night, lying in bed, I replayed that moment over and over. The vulnerability in Jamie's voice, the way our fingers intertwined. It was like the bees, delicate and fierce, teaching me how to be brave. Not long after, Jamie invited me to meet his family back in his hometown. I was nervous. Meeting someone's family always felt like a big deal. But I said yes because I wanted to be part of his world, not just the rooftop. The trip was a whirlwind of new faces, warm welcomes, and endless stories about honey, flowers, and small-town life. Jamie's parents were kind and funny, and it was clear where he'd gotten his passion for beekeeping. Watching him with them, seeing that easy laughter and genuine connection, I realized I was falling even deeper. One evening, after dinner, Jamie and I found ourselves alone on the porch, the stars glittering overhead. He reached for my hand again, his thumb brushing softly over my knuckles. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. "It means a lot." I smiled, feeling the weight of those words. "Me too. It's different, but good. Being here with you." He leaned in, forehead resting against mine. "I want us to keep building this, no matter what comes." "I want that too," I whispered. Back in the city, things didn't get easier overnight. Between work, rooftop duties, and trying to figure out what this relationship meant for both of us, There were moments of doubt and frustration. Jamie had his routines, his instincts, and I was still learning how to fit into his world and how to bring him into mine. One stressful afternoon, after a particularly rough day at the office, I found myself on the rooftop, hunched over a hive with aching shoulders and a mind full of worries. Jamie joined me, setting down his tools and sitting beside me in silence. "You okay?" he asked softly. I sighed. "Honestly, I'm not sure. Sometimes it feels like I'm juggling too much, like I'm not enough." Jamie reached out, tucking a loose strand of hair behind my ear. "You are more than enough. You're learning, growing, and I'm here. We're in this together." His words, simple but sincere, felt like a balm. I looked at him, the man who managed a rooftop apiary, who kissed me like it was the most natural thing in the world, who trusted me with his bees and his heart, and I realized how lucky I was. We stayed there for a long time, watching the bees dance among the flowers, the city humming far below. And in that quiet, sticky sweet moment, I knew I was ready to keep buzzing alongside him, wherever this wild, beautiful journey took us. One crisp Saturday morning, Jamie and I were up on the rooftop earlier than usual, the city still yawning awake below us. The honey harvest was scheduled for that weekend, and it's a big deal, not just for the bees, but for us. It's the moment where all the patience, the careful tending, and the tiny daily victories come together into something tangible. Sweet, golden, and sticky. Jamie was already setting up the frames and gear with that focused energy I loved watching. I was fumbling with the smoker, trying not to look like a total rookie. Smoke in one eye, nerves in the other. He caught me and laughed, the sound light and genuine. "You'll get there," he said, winking. I smiled back, feeling the familiar buzz in my chest, not just from the bees, but from being here with him, doing this together. As we worked side by side, he told me stories about past honey harvests, the flukes and successes, and the little quirks of the hive we were tending. Our hands brushed more than once, and each time it sent a spark through me. There's something about working with nature that strips away all the usual distractions. No phones, no emails, just the hum of the city beneath and the rhythm of the bees. Halfway through, Jamie paused and turned to me, eyes glinting. "You know, this rooftop started as a way to give the bees a little green space in the city, but honestly, it's become something else. A place where I found more than just honey." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Oh yeah, what did you find?" He smiled, a little shy. "You." I felt warmth flood my cheeks. I could say the same. We shared a quiet laugh before getting back to work. The bees buzzed industriously, and I realized how much I had learned. Not just about beekeeping, but about trust, patience, and opening up. Later that afternoon, after we'd packed up the last of the honey jars, Jamie surprised me by pulling out a small jar tied with a ribbon. "For you," he said, handing it over with a grin. "Our first harvest together." I held the jar, the golden honey catching the sunlight. "It's amazing." "Thank you. Not just for the honey," he added, eyes locking with mine. "For sticking with me, for trusting me." We stood there, the city stretching endlessly behind us. The rooftop, our little world. Jamie's hand found mine again, fingers intertwining naturally. "Hey," he said softly, "there's something I've been meaning to ask." My heart skipped. "Yeah?" He took a breath, then smiled that crooked, earnest smile that had me hooked from day one. "Would you consider making this us official? I mean, I know we're not in a rush, but I want to know your mind." I laughed, a little breathless. "I think I've been yours since that first awkward hive inspection." Jamie's grin widened, and he pulled me close, kissing me like the world had narrowed down to just the two of us and the buzzing bees. As the sun dipped behind the skyline, casting golden light over the city, I realized that sometimes the sweetest things come from the most unexpected places. Like a rooftop full of bees, a guy who managed them with care, and the slow, steady buzz of something real beginning to grow between us. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. Months passed after that honey harvest, and I kept thinking about how much my life had changed, quietly, steadily, like the bees building honeycomb one hexagon at a time. Jamie and I settled into a rhythm that felt right for us, balancing work, rooftop duties, and weekends filled with lazy mornings and simple conversations that somehow said everything. One evening, we were up on the roof again, the city skyline glowing as twilight settled in. The hives were calm after a long season, bees tucked in for the night. Jamie pulled out 2 small jars of honey, one from our first harvest together, the other from the latest batch. He handed me the older jar, the glass worn and sticky from months of handling. "Look how far we've come," he said softly. I smiled, tracing the label with my finger. "It's been a wild ride. I never thought I'd say this, but I'm grateful for every moment." Jamie tucked a stray curl behind my ear, his touch gentle. "Me too. You've taught me so much about trust, about patience, and about opening my heart." I felt a warmth spread through me, deeper than anything the honey could offer. "You made me believe in something I thought was out of reach. Not just the bees, but us." He leaned in, forehead resting against mine. "This rooftop, these bees, they brought us together. But it's you who made it home." We sat like that for a while, letting the night wrap around us like a quiet promise. No grand declarations, no fireworks, just 2 people finding comfort in the steady hum of life they were building together. As I looked out over the city, I realized that love, much like beekeeping, wasn't about rush or perfection. It was about showing up, day after day, tending the fragile parts, and celebrating the small victories. And in that slow, steady process, something beautiful takes shape. I squeezed Jamie's hand and smiled. "So, what's next for us in our buzzing little kingdom?" He grinned, eyes sparkling. "Whatever we want it to be, together." And for the first time in a long time, that felt like everything.